David Carl Davey Allison was a NASCAR driver. He was best known for driving the number 28 Texaco-Havoline Ford for Robert Yates Racing in the Winston Cup Series. Born in Hollywood, Florida, he was the eldest of 4 children born to Bobby Allison and wife Judy. The family moved to Hueytown, Alabama, and along with Bobby's brother Donnie Allison, family friend Red Farmer, and Neil Bonnett, became known in racing circles as the Alabama Gang. Early career: growing up, Allison participated in athletics, preferring football, but was destined, like many children of racers, to become a racer himself. He began working for his father's Winston Cup team after graduating high school, and would work after hours on his own race car, a Chevy Nova built by Davey and a group of his friends affectionately known as the Peach Fuzz Gang. He began his career in 1979 at Birmingham International Raceway and notched his first win in just his 6th start. He became a regular winner at BIR and by 1983, was racing in the Automobile Racing Club of America Series. Allison won both ARCA events at his home track, Talladega Superspeedway in 1983, and was named ARCA Rookie of the Year in 1984, placing second in the series title. That same year, he married his first wife, Deborah. Allison continued racing in the ARCA Series in 1985 and eventually notched 8 wins in the series, 4 at Talladega Superspeedway. He also began competing in some of NASCAR's lower divisions, and in July 1985, car owner Hoss Ellington gave him his first chance to drive a Winston Cup car in the Talladega 500. Allison qualified Ellington's Chevrolet 22nd and finished 10th in his first Winston Cup start. This impressive showing earned Davey more Winston Cup opportunities in 1986, where he would sub for injured friend and fellow Alabama Gang member Neil Bonnett in Junior Johnson's number 12 Budweiser Chevy. Early Winston Cup career: prior to the 1987 season, car owner Harry Rainier tapped Davey to replace veteran driver Cale Yarborough in the Rainier-Lundy number 28 Ford Thunderbird. Yarborough was leaving the Rainier-Lundy team to start his own operation along with the team's sponsor, Hardee's. Rainier negotiated a sponsorship deal with Texaco's Havoline Motor Oil brand, a deal that was signed during the NASCAR edition of Speed Weeks at Daytona International Speedway. On qualifying day, Davey signaled that he was in Winston Cup to stay when he qualified in unmarked, but Texaco-Havoline painted number 28 Thunderbird second for the 1987 Daytona 500, becoming the first rookie ever to start on the front row for NASCAR's most prestigious event. A pit miscue which allowed a rear tire to fall off on the track ended his hopes of a good finish in the race, but success for Davey Allison would be just around the corner. May 3, 1987 would become an infamous day in NASCAR history. Earlier in the week, Bill Elliott had qualified his number 9 Coors Melling Ford Thunderbird at a record 212.809 miles per hour for the Winston 500 at the unlighted Talladega Superspeedway. Davey Allison would qualify third, while father Bobby would start second alongside Elliott in the Stavler brothers' number 22 Miller Buick. On lap 22 of the event, Bobby Allison ran over a piece of debris, cutting his right rear tire. The car turned sideways, lifted into the air, became airborne, and crashed vertically into the front stretch spectator fence near the start-finish line. The car landed back on the track and collected a number of other competitors. Davey was ahead of his father at the time and saw the crash unfold in his mirror. Bobby Allison was not injured, but the crash slightly injured several spectators and the race was red-flagged for 2 hours and 38 minutes. It was this event that triggered the requirement of smaller carburetors, and later, carburetor restrictor plates on engines at Daytona and Talladega to reduce the top speeds. When the race resumed, Davey continued to run up front, and when Elliott exited the race with engine failure, Davey's toughest competition was eliminated. With darkness falling on the Talladega Superspeedway during a late caution flag, the decision was made to end the race 10 laps short of its 188-lap distance. Running second on the restart, Davey passed leader Dale Earnhardt on the backstretch and pulled away for his first Winston Cup win. In winning the race, Davey became the first rookie since Ron Bouchard in 1981 to win a Winston Cup event. Davey would better that feat just 28 days later by winning the Budweiser 500 at Dover International Speedway, becoming, at the time, the only rookie to win 2 Winston Cup events. In all, Davey started 22 of the 29 Winston Cup races in 1987, winning twice, and scoring 9 top 5 and 10 top 10 finishes. He also won 5 poles in his rookie season. The 1988 season started with much promise. Davey again started outside the front row for the Daytona 500, the first modern-day race utilizing the NASCAR-mandated carburetor restrictor plate. While father Bobby was battling up front early in the race, Davey and his team struggled with a car that was repaired during the early morning hours following a crash in the final practice session. But as the race came to a conclusion, Davey found himself running second, just behind his legendary father. Bobby Allison would go on to hold off his son and win his third Daytona 500. Father and son would celebrate their 1 and 2 finish in victory lane. Both would consider this the greatest moment of their lives. But Davey would struggle through much of the first half of the 1988 season as he ran some of the Winston Cup short tracks for the first time. The team was also suffering from engine failures and now sole owner Harry Ranier was looking to sell the team. Crew chief Joey Knuckles was fired and engine builder Robert Yates replaced him. Then on June 19, at Pocono International Raceway came his father's near-fatal, career-ending crash at Pocono. With his father clinging to life in a Pennsylvania hospital, Davey Allison raced on but failed to finish the next 3 events. The team rebounded when the series returned to Pocono in July with Davey scoring a third-place finish. Back at Talladega, the number 28 Ford again suffered engine failure but Davey would drive his father's car later in the race when relief driver Mike Alexander was overcome by heat. 2 races later, Davey would score his first win of the season at Michigan International Speedway. The win changed the fortunes for the financially strapped team and after a series of top 5 and top 10 finishes, Davey would win the inaugural race at the new Richmond International Raceway. In October, Ranier sold the team to Yates, who temporarily remained as Allison's crew chief. The rest of the season was a mixed bag but Davey would finish the season with a third-place finish at Phoenix International Raceway, and a second at the season-ending Atlanta Journal 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He would finish 8th in the final Winston Cup standings. But the roller-coaster 1988 Winston Cup season had taken a toll on Davey Allison's marriage and he and Deborah quietly divorced during the off-season. Initial years with Robert Yates Racing, 1989–1990. Davey Allison's 1989 season did not start well. A year after he and his father's 1-2 Daytona 500 finish, Davey started a disappointing 16th. Then was involved in an early incident with Jeff Bodine that sent his car careening into the sandbar separating the track's backstretch from Lake Lloyd. The car made one slow, complete, rollover with Davey eventually restarting the car and driving it back to the pits. He drove the damaged, hoodless car to a 25th place finish and had a heated exchange with Bodine following the race. The team rebounded at Rockingham and when the series moved to Talladega in May for the Winston 500, Davey had scored 1 top 10 and 3 top 5 finishes. Davey started on the pole at Talladega and got his first win of 1989, his second victory in Talladega's spring event. After the race, Davey stood 6th in the Winston Cup Championship standings, but did not win again until the next restrictor plate race, the Pepsi 400 at Daytona, his last win of the season. By the end of the season, Davey had collected 7 top 5 and 13 top 10 finishes along with 1 pole position to go with the 2 wins. He slipped to 11th in the final Winston Cup standings, a disappointment over the previous season. However, Davey would marry his second wife, Liz, during the season, and their first child, Krista, was born prior to the 1990 season. The 1990 season did not start much better than the 1989 season and by the 6th race at Bristol, Davey was a disappointing 17th in the Winston Cup standings. A poor qualifying run had the team pitting in the backstretch pits, which usually doomed a team's chances of winning the race. But Robert Yates decided against pitting on the final caution flag and Davey scored his second short track win in a thrilling photo finish with Mark Martin, winning by just 8 inches. But the win did not change the team's fortunes, and after an ill-handling car at Dover required Davey to ask for relief from fellow Alabama driver Hud Stricklin, Robert Yates decided to hire Suitcase Jake Elder as the team's crew chief. Davey won the Fall of Lowe's Motor Speedway but finished the season 13th in the final Winston Cup standings. He again posted 2 wins, but only 5 top 5 and 10 top 10 finishes. 1991 and the hiring of Larry McReynolds, the 1991 season began with much promise. Davey won the pole for the Daytona 500 and was in contention for the win until the final laps. After a late race restart, eventual winner Ernie Irvan passed Dale Earnhardt for the lead. Davey tried to follow Irvan around Earnhardt but could not make the pass, and the two drivers battled side by side for a few laps. As the cars came off turn 2, Earnhardt's car spun, collecting Allison and Carl Petty. Davey was unable to continue and finished a disappointing 15th. From there, things went downhill. Davey finished 12th at Richmond, 16th at Rockingham, then crashed hard early in the Motorcraft 500 at Atlanta, finishing 40th. Davey was openly feuding with crew chief Elder, and Allison threatened to quit the team if Elder stayed. After the poor result at Atlanta, Robert Yates decided that he had to make a change at crew chief. Elder was fired, and Larry McReynolds was hired away from the Kenny Bernstein team to replace him. In his first race with McReynolds at the helm, Allison finished second at the 1991 Transith 400. A third-place finish followed at Bristol, then a 6th at North Wilkesboro and an 8th at Martinsville. The team finished 22nd at Talladega due to a large accident triggered by Ernie Irvan, but there was no doubt the team was much improved and was destined for bigger things. 2 weeks later, Davey dominated the Winston All-Star race at Charlotte, and continued his domination by winning the Coca-Cola 600 the following week, leading 263 of the race's 400 laps. 2 races later, Davey won his first road course event at then Sears Point International Raceway, where he was awarded the victory after Ricky Rudd was penalized by NASCAR for spinning Allison out on the final lap. He won again at Michigan, then finished third in the Pepsi 400 at Daytona. At the halfway point of the 1991 season, Davey had climbed to 5th in the Winston Cup point standings. After finishing 14th at Pocono, the series moved to Talladega. As the race wound down, Davey Allison was poised for yet another win behind leader Dale Earnhardt. But Davey was unable to get drafting help from fellow Ford Motor Company drivers, and he slipped to 9th place after attempting to pass Earnhardt for the lead. In his post-race interview, Allison stated, "All we needed was 3 inches to clear Earnhardt. When you can't get help from a fellow Ford driver, that's pitiful." In a fit of rage after the race, Allison punched a wall in the team's transporter, breaking his wrist. The injury failed to slow him down, however, as he finished a remarkable 10th on the road course at Watkins Glen, then was second at Michigan, a photo finish in which Dale Jarrett scored his first Winston Cup victory. Davey scored back-to-back victories at Rockingham and Phoenix and entered the final race at Atlanta second in the Winston Cup standings. But a dead battery in that race relegated him to a 17th place finish, dropping him to third in the final standings, only 4 points behind Ricky Rudd. Dale Earnhardt won the championship. The final tally of the 1991 season for Davey Allison: 5 wins, 12 top 5 and 16 top 10 finishes, and 3 pole positions. It was also during the 1991 season that Davey and Liz welcomed their second child, a son, Robert Gray Allison. With Larry McReynolds at the helm, Davey Allison entered the 1992 season as a legitimate championship contender. 1992: Statistically, 1992 was Davey Allison's best season in Winston Cup racing. Davey started 6th in the 1992 Daytona 500 but was probably not quite as fast as the Junior Johnson teammates of Bill Elliott and Sterling Marlin. But the race would change dramatically on lap 92 when Elliott, Marlin, and Ernie Irvan triggered a multi-car crash at the front of the pack. 14 cars were eliminated, but Alzona Euro, and eventual runner-up Morgan Shepherd a Euro somehow made it through the mess. He would dominate the event, lead 127 laps to join his father as a Daytona 500 winner. Allison also holds the distinction of being the only driver to lead the Daytona 500 at halfway and go on to win. As of 2015, no Daytona 500 winner has led the halfway lap and go on to win. Bill Elliott would rebound to win the next 4 events, but Allison was not far behind in either event, posting 4 top 5 finishes to maintain his lead in the points. A hard crash in the Food City 500 at Bristol left him with a bruised shoulder, but the following weekend he had Jimmy Hensley on hand for relief just in case Allison could not go the distance. Allison managed to race through the pain and go the distance and won at North Wilkesboro after beating Rusty Wallace and Jeffrey Bodine off of pit road with a fast pit stop and leading the remaining laps en route to victory. Another hard crash at Martinsville re-injured his ribs, but Allison rebounded yet again, leading a contingent of Fords to victory in the Winston 500 at Talladega using the same car that he won the Daytona 500 with. It would be his 3rd victory at Talladega. The win also put him in position to win the Winston Million if he could finish off the Small Slam with a win in either the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte, or the Southern 500 at Darlington. Next up was the Winston All-Star Race. 1 year removed from his domination of that event in the Coca-Cola 600, Davey was ready to take the spotlight again. But this time around, there was more focus on the event itself. Over the winter, the Masco Lighting Company had installed a state-of-the-art lighting system at then Charlotte Motor Speedway. Billed as One Hot Night by the Nashville Network, which was to broadcast the event, the Winston was the first superspeedway race to be held under the lights. Davey would drive the same car that he used to dominate the event 1 year earlier, affectionately known as 007. In the final, 10-lap segment of the race, Dale Earnhardt led, followed by Kyle Petty and Davey. In the 3rd turn on the final lap, Petty nudged Earnhardt's car and the GM Goodyear Chevrolet spun. Davey took advantage of the contact and jumped into the lead. But Petty charged back and as Davey crossed the start-finish line to win the race, the 2 cars came together, sending the driver's side of Davey's car hard into the outside wall in a shower of sparks. An unconscious Allison was taken from his car and airlifted to a Charlotte hospital. The crash left him with a concussion, bruised lung, and a battered and bruised body. His car, 007, was totaled. Allison would later claim to have sustained an out-of-body experience after the crash. He claimed to have awoke to see his crashed car below him as he rose away from it, and to have turned his attention away from the frantic work of the emergency workers to a bright light above, which faded and left him in darkness until he awoke later in the hospital. McReynolds stated during the FOX telecasts that the first words from Allison when he awoke in the hospital were "Did we win?" McReynolds told Allison, "Yes, Davey, we won." Victory celebrations went on even though the driver was not present and all crew members later went to the hospital to be with their driver. The wreck did not deter Allison. He finished 4th in the Coca-Cola 600 the following week despite the injuries and maintained his points lead. He then finished 11th at Dover, 28th at Sears Point, and 5th at Pocono. Still hanging on to the points lead and his body healing, Davey won the pole and dominated the Miller Genuine Draft 400 at Michigan, leading 158 of the race's 200 laps. The first half of the season ended with Davey posting a 10th-place finish in the Pepsi 400 at Daytona. At the halfway point of the season, Allison had a 46-point lead over second-place Bill Elliott and a 134-point lead over third-place Alan Kulwicki, and had held the points lead since the first race of the season, despite the injuries and setbacks. That would all change as the series went back to Pocono. Davey won the pole for the event and led 115 of the first 149 laps. But a lengthy pit stop during a caution flag sent him to the middle of the pack. On lap 150, Allison was charging back through the pack, followed closely by Darrell Waltrip. The 2 cars made contact and Davey went sliding into the grass off Pocono's tunnel turn. The car went airborne and began a series of violent flips before landing on top of an infield guardrail. Miraculously, Davey survived the crash. He was airlifted to the hospital with a severe concussion, along with a broken arm, wrist, and collarbone. His 33rd place finish left him 9 points behind Bill Elliott for the series title, but that seemed insignificant at the moment. Especially traumatizing was the fact that Pocono was the site of Davey's father Bobby's career-ending crash a few years earlier. In fact, many worried fans wondered if the younger Allison's career was over. Davey arrived at Talladega the following week wearing dark shades to hide eyes severely bruised in the Pocono crash. Allison famously told a reporter asking to see his eyes at the press conference, "You can see it, but it's ugly." His arm was in a cast that allowed him to drive, and Velcro attachments to his glove and the car's shifter knob helped him drive with less exertion, but Bobby Hillin, Jr. would relieve Davey after the initial laps of the Die Hard 500. Under NASCAR rules, the driver who takes the green flag is the one assigned to the points for all drivers that drive that car during the race. Hillin drove the number 28 Texaco-Havoline Ford Thunderbird to a third-place finish at Talladega, helping Davey and the team keep pace with Elliott. The team was a strong contender for the win until suffering a jack failure on a pit stop. The following week, veteran road racer Dorsey Schroeder would relieve Allison, but he could only manage a 20th-place finish. With his body healed enough to allow him to drive an entire race, Davey headed to Michigan where he had dominated the track's earlier event. But tragedy struck as the Michigan events began. While practicing for the weekend's Busch Series race, Davey's younger brother, Clifford crashed hard in the third and fourth turns of Michigan International Speedway. He would die en route to the hospital. Davey drove to a fifth-place finish in the Champion Spark Plug 400, then went home to Hueytown for Clifford's funeral. The following weekend, he crashed again at Bristol, finishing 30th. Although still in second place in the Winston Cup standings, he now trailed leader Bill Elliott by 109 points. Davey's chance to win the Winston Million was up next as the series headed to Darlington for the Mountain Dew Southern 500, which was worth both a $1 million bonus if he could win the Small Slam, but moreover, become the fourth driver to win the career Grand Slam. There was a promotion for the event as fake $1 million bills were printed with Allison's face on them were handed out for fans. Davey led 72 laps of the event and was in contention to win, but soon after the leaders pitted for tires and fuel, rain halted the race with 69 laps left. Instead it was Darrell Waltrip, gambling that the rains would come, did not pit and was leading the race when it was red flagged. He was declared the winner as darkness fell and the rains continued. Waltrip, who had long feuded with the entire Allison clan, sat next to his car on pit road and lawn chair and held a colorful umbrella, gleefully joking that the rain shower was worth $1 million to him as he became the fourth driver to finish a career Grand Slam. Davey finished fifth and was now 119 points behind Elliott, who finished third. Allison and Elliott continued their drive for the championship after Darlington as the two kept pace with each other. But beginning with the Goodies 500 at Martinsville on September 28, Elliott's hold on the points lead began to slip. He finished 30th in that event while Allison finished 16th. Then at North Wilkesboro, Allison posted an 11th place finish, while Elliott finished 26th. Back at Charlotte, Allison finished a disappointing 19th, but Elliott finished 30th and there were now four drivers within 100 points of Elliott: Allison, Alan Kulwicki, Mark Martin, and Harry Gant. Martin and Kulwicki finished first and second respectively at Charlotte, and Kulwicki was continuing a late-season charge. 3 races prior to Charlotte, Kulwicki had crashed and finished 34th at Dover, leaving him 278 points behind Elliott and in fourth place in the standings. Elliott's skid stopped temporarily at Rockingham where he finished fourth. Davey finished 10th and Kulwicki 12th, and entering the final 2 races of the 1992 season, Davey was 70 points behind Elliott in second, with Kulwicki 85 points behind in third. But Davey's fortunes changed dramatically at Phoenix as he won the event by beating his closest rivals off of pit road, and Elliott finished 31st. Davey now had the points lead for the first time since his violent Pocono crash, and was 30 points ahead of Kulwicki, and 40 ahead of Elliott, who had slipped to third in the standings. Also in contention to win the championship as the series moved to the final race at Atlanta were Harry Gant, Kyle Petty, and Mark Martin. The 1992 Hooters 500 would be a milestone race in NASCAR Winston Cup history. It would be the final race of Richard Petty's career, as well as the first for future Winston Cup champion Jeff Gordon. Couple that with the closest championship race in history, and the race was destined to be a classic. Davey Allison entered the race needing only to finish fifth or better to win the Winston Cup. A first-lap incident involving Rick Mast caused minor damage to Davey's car, and he battled through much of the race to stay in the top 10. Meanwhile, Elliott and Kulwicki were staging a battle for the ages, battling for and swapping the lead through much of the event. Late in the race, Davey had finally managed to reach the top 5 and was in position to win the championship when Ernie Irvan lost control of his car on the front stretch on lap 286. Davey could not avoid Irvan's spinning car and plowed into the number 4 Kodak Chevrolet Lumina. Allison's tumultuous 1992 season was over, his championship hopes lost as Elliott and Kulwicki finished first and second in the race respectively. Kulwicki, an independent driver who had turned down offers to drive for other teams, including Junior Johnson, won the championship by leading one more lap than Elliott. 1993. Though 1992 had been a heartbreaking year for Davey Allison and the Robert Yates Racing team in more ways than one, they had to be encouraged by their run for the championship. But 1993 opened on a sour note with Allison finishing 28th at Daytona. That finish was followed by a 16th at Rockingham, but Davey rebounded to win at Richmond the following week. The next race at Atlanta was delayed a week by a blizzard that blanketed much of the southeast. Morgan Shepherd won the race and Davey finished 13th. He then posted an 11th at Darlington. Despite the early season struggles, Davey was 6th in the Winston Cup standings, while defending series champ Kulwicki was 9th. Davey Allison had debuted in the International Race of Champions in 1992, but his injuries forced him to miss the last 2 races. 1993 was shaping up to be a far better year for Davey, with a second place at Daytona and a victory at Darlington, giving him a large points lead. 3 days after Kulwicki's death in an airplane crash, Davey Allison finished 5th in an emotional race at Bristol. He followed that finish with a 4th at North Wilkesboro, 2nd at Martinsville, 7th at Talladega, and 15th at Sears Point. He finished a disappointing 30th in the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte, but rebounded at Dover, finishing 3rd. He was 6th at Pocono, but finished 35th at Michigan and 31st at Daytona. Halfway through the 1993 season, Davey was 5th in the point standings, but was 323 points behind leader Dale Earnhardt. Still, Davey and the Robert Yates team were confident that they could put their early season struggles and inconsistency behind them and could make a run for the championship in the second half. The inaugural race at New Hampshire International Speedway proved the team's optimism was not unfounded. Davey led 38 laps of the event and finished 3rd behind Rusty Wallace and Mark Martin. Death. On Monday, July 12, 1993, Allison boarded his newly acquired Hughes 369HS helicopter to fly to Talladega Superspeedway to watch family friend Neil Bonnett and his son David test a car for David's Busch Series debut. He picked up another family friend, legendary racer Red Farmer, en route to the track. Allison was attempting to land the helicopter inside a fenced-in area of the track infield when the craft nosed up suddenly, then crashed. The National Transportation Safety Board blamed the crash on Allison's inexperience in helicopters, coupled with the decision to attempt a landing. Neil Bonnett was able to free a semi-conscious Farmer from the wreckage, but Allison was unresponsive and could not be freed until paramedics arrived. Farmer would go on to a lengthy but successful recovery, but Allison never regained consciousness after sustaining a critical head injury. He was pronounced dead at 7 a.m. the next morning by a neurosurgeon at Caraway Methodist Medical Center in Birmingham after a procedure to relieve pressure on his brain proved unsuccessful. Thousands packed the auditorium at St. Aloysius Church in Bessemer, Alabama to pay their respects at his funeral. He is buried near his brother, Clifford, in Bessemer's Highland Memorial Gardens. His organs except his corneas were donated. After the final race of the season, Series champion Dale Earnhardt and race winner Wallace drove a side-by-side Polish victory lap carrying flags for fallen drivers Alan Kulwicki and Allison. In his short NASCAR Winston Cup career, Davey Allison posted 19 wins, 66 top 5 and 92 top 10 finishes. He also won 14 poles and earned $6,724,174. He is survived by his wife, Liz, and 2 children, daughter Krista Marie, and son Robert Gray. Tribute: 10 years after Allison's first win, Texaco debuted the throwback battle-style paint scheme in his memory. It ran 2 races, but in the second, at the 1997 Die Hard 500 in October, Ernie Irvan put the throwback battle star on the pole. Later, Texaco would often use the throwback paint scheme for their drivers at the track until they discontinued sponsorship. The R.K. Allen Oil Company, the Talladega-based distributor for Texaco in the area, remembered the legacy of Allison with the Talladega Texaco Walk of Fame in Talladega, where fans vote drivers, past and present, to a specially themed Hall of Fame for drivers. The induction ceremony takes place at the AMP Energy 500 weekend. Talladega Texaco Walk of Fame members Note: starting in 2003, only one inactive driver was voted, unlike the past, when 2 were voted. The board of directors also inducted an active driver in 2000. Notes: 1. The Walk of Fame induction was moved from July to October in 1997, and was in September in 2003. 2. Hamilton was voted by fans to the Walk of Fame in 2000. The board of directors did not want the retiring Ultrip, whose 84 wins was the most by a driver who started his career after 1972, to be inducted as an inactive driver, so he was automatically inducted by the board. It should be known Ultrip was very unpopular at Talladega in his prime for his feuds with all 3 Allisons, starting when he replaced Donnie in the D-Guard racing car in 1975. Ironically, it was Ultrip who was a relief driver driving when Donnie won the 1977 Talladega 500. 3. The board of directors of the Talladega Texaco Walk of Fame inducted the inaugural class by decree in 1994. Legacy: Allison was leading the IROC Series Championship at the time of his death, with 1 race remaining in the 4-race series. Terry Labonte drove the final race in place of Allison and secured the championship for him. His championship money, $175,000, was set up as a trust fund for his children. Allison finished 31st in the final 1993 NASCAR Championship standings. Racing Champions ran a die-caster model of Allison's 1989 Texaco car as a tribute after his death, as well as his standard 1993 scheme in the main line of die-cast. Racing Champions also made die-cast replicas of cars Allison drove during his career in the Racing Champions Premier line, with a trading card that read Champion Forever. A promotional die-cast 28 car was released with Allison's replacement, Ernie Irvan, listed as driver to pay tribute to the team's win at Martinsville in the fall of 1993. Only 20,000 of them were released. Allison was posthumously inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1998. Allison became a figure in a controversy as his widow became involved with country music star Joe Diffie shortly after Allison's death. Tabloid television programs and newspapers gave much coverage to the story at the time, with some claiming that the two had been lovers before Allison's death. Liz has openly discussed her relationship with Diffie, most recently on the Paul Feinbaum radio network during the week of the 2006 race at Talladega. Liz expressed some regret over the relationship and mentioned that she and Diffie were band-aids for each other, and band-aids were not meant to be permanent. Liz Allison and their 2 children moved to Nashville, and she married physical therapist Ryan Hackett on May 13, 2000. After being divorced for 4 years, Bobby and Judy Allison reunited at the wedding, after nearly 7 years of the tragedy had separated them. On April 28, 2003, the mayor of Hueytown, Alabama, declared it Davey Allison Day and is celebrated on the weekend of the springtime Talladega race. Due to Allison's death, Robert Yates initially chose not to field a car at the 1993 Miller Genuine Draft 400, stating it's hard to race with tears in your eyes. Yates would return to Talladega with Robbie Gordon replacing Allison in the number 28, but he lost control of the Texaco-Havoline Ford early in the race and crashed and finished last. Lake Speed would take over driving duties until the 1993 Southern 500. Ernie Irvan would later take over the ride at the Mountain Dew Southern 500 and won the Goodies 500 at Martinsville Speedway, and it was a heartwarming time for Irvan's crew as it marked their first time back to victory lane since Allison's death. Irvan would also win the Slick 5500 at Lowe's Motor Speedway as well. Racing Champions ran the number 28 Havoline Ford with Ernie Irvan replacing Allison as the driver in tribute to the win. Allison also had his own brand of chili by Bunker Hill with his face on the can. Allison also had a comic book printed about him during his racing days. A road called Allison Bonnett Memorial Drive in his hometown is honored by him, along with fellow native Neil Bonnett, who died a year after Davey. In the video games NASCAR 99 and NASCAR 2000, he appears as an unlockable NASCAR legend with his Texaco Ford that he drove from 1987 to 1989. Motorsports career results Daytona 500 . See also, Alabama Gang, list of all-time NASCAR Cup Series winners, list of Daytona 500 pole position winners, list of Daytona 500 winners, list of fatalities from aviation accidents, list of former NASCAR drivers, list of NASCAR Sprint All-Star race drivers, list of people from Alabama, list of sportspeople who died during their careers, NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers. References: Caravelo, David. Top 10 rookie campaigns at NASCAR's highest level. NASCAR. Retrieved January 20, 2014. Caravelo, David. Top 10 Spring Battles at Bristol. NASCAR. Retrieved March 13, 2014. 1991 Save Mart 300 Allison wins after RUD penalty, The NASCAR Chronicle 1991, NASCAR Facts and Figs, The Daytona 500, 1992 First Union 400, the winning car was sold by Robert Yates at the Barrett-Jackson car auction, Sino, Joseph. Davey Allison, stock car driver, dies at 32 after helicopter crash. The New York Times. Retrieved January 17, 2015. Find a grave profiles for the Allison family, findargrave.com. Access June 29, 2015. Crossman, Matt. Davey Allison's incredible legacy lives on 20 years after his death. Sports Illustrated. Retrieved July 13, 2013. NASCAR 94 Preview and Press Guide Final Points Standings 1993, Davey Allison Racing Champions 1993 edition Racing Champions Premier, Racing Champions Premier Card says Champion Forever, Ernie Irvan Racing Champions Diecast Trading Card 1 of 20,000, NASCAR legend Bobby Allison relives glory, sorrow, MiamiHerald.com, November 15, 2008. External links. Official website, Davey Allison Driver Statistics at Racing Reference, Davey Allison at Find a Grave, NTSB report on the crash. Widow Liz's official site.